everybody, and welcome to another introduction to Met streaming. So grateful that the Met is providing these opportunities for us to watch videos from their archives and from their HD cinema offerings. Tonight is one of those cinema offerings. I'm Carol Anderson from the Utah Opera, principal coach, and I'm thrilled to bring you an introduction to one of Bellini's lesser known pieces, La Sonnambula. It's an opera that I always knew arias from. Again, I think I've said that about a number of pieces that I've introduced. And this one I've actually done a production of. It's a very interesting piece. It's dramaturgically a little bit challenging, and I find their solution rather interesting, the solution that the Met director has come up with. So Vincenzo Bellini lived quite a short life, 1801 to 1835. He had written 10 operas at the time of his death. In comparison to his colleagues, Rossini and Donizetti, he was far less prolific. At the same age of 34, Rossini had written 39 operas and Donizetti had written 35. So he was not the facile composer that the two of them were. Although this particular case, I think he wrote this one pretty fast. His first brush with fame came with Il Pirata in 1827 and Bianca e Fernando in 1828. He had an 1829 effort, Zaira, which I had never heard of, but then I'd never heard of Bianca e Fernando either, I suppose. And that was not so much of a successful outing. The next year, his contemporary and sometimes rival Giovanni Pacini failed to meet the deadline for creating a setting of Romeo and Juliet. Bellini swooped in and uncharacteristically quickly delivered I Capuletti e i Montecchi, which was a big hit and kind of put him permanently on the map, so to speak. Bellini's partner for 7 of his operas was Felice Romani, who was Italy's most respected theatrical poet of the early 19th century. Romani wrote some 90 libretti, most well-known being Elixir of Love and Anna Bolena, which were set by Donizetti, in Il Turco in Italia, set by Rossini. 11 different composers set his libretto to Francesca da Rimini, probably none of whom you've heard. I was looking at the Wikipedia list for Romani's works, and I was astounded at some composers that I had just not run into. So, just a reminder, we've talked about bel canto operas a number of times, so if you're a bel canto fan and you've listened to one of my lectures, you may have heard this. But for those of you who are tuning in for the first time or for the first time with a bel canto piece, I want to remind you that this bel canto that I'm mentioning was a style that Rossini, Donizetti, and Bellini all composed within. It's characterized by legato melodic lines, long spun out melodies, combined with dauntingly virtuosic vocal writing, with many passages of rapid notes, which we call melismas, or we call it coloratura. So the bel canto singer must be fearless and have a flawless vocal technique. That's all. So Romani's libretto for La Sonnambula, which means the sleepwalker, was based on a ballet pantomime by Eugène Scribe and Jean-Pierre Homais called The Sleepwalker, or The Arrival of the New Lord. It had a pastoral setting and a charming story, and it was to become another triumphant success in Bellini's time in producing operas from Milan for La Scala. Just as in Bellini's later operas, I Puritani, which I'll talk about in a couple of nights, or Norma, which I have already talked about, one does not mount La Sonnambula without having the lead soprano in mind. When we did it in Santa Fe, it was actually a conversation with Natalie Dessay, who is tonight's La Sonnambula. She had come to Santa Fe for a concert and had really enjoyed her experience, so the administration asked, what do you want to do? And Sonnambula was the vehicle she chose. So it was definitely a star vehicle mounted for her, as it is tonight. Even Bellini had his soprano in mind from the beginning. It was a project from 1831, and it was originally meant to be a setting of that Victor Hugo play Ernani. Verdi did actually end up setting that. And that project was to be centered around the soprano Giuditta Pasta. For those of you who watched Ernani or are familiar with Verdi's Ernani, Bellini actually abandoned the subject because of his worries about the Italian censors, and Verdi encountered many of the same challenges. He just sort of pushed through. The title role of Amina, the sleepwalker, with its high tessitura, is renowned for its difficulty. It requires a complete command of trills and florid technique. Pasta is described as a soprano sfogato, which was a term I wasn't so familiar with. A soprano sfogato is said to possess a dark timbre with a rich and strong low register, as well as the high notes of a soprano and occasionally a coloratura soprano. So the voices are strong and dramatic, and they have the wonderful bel canto technique that we're expecting with the legato lines and the ability to just demonstrate vocal agility. They sing in the soprano tessitura as well as the contralto tessitura with great ease. This is not a type of soprano that we encounter a lot, and I think it's one of those specific voice types that you may or may not really apply on a regular basis. I've never heard a young soprano up and coming in the business say, I'm a soprano sfogato. It's interesting, though, to note that Giuditta Pasta originated the roles of Anna Bolena, Norma, and La Sonnambula, which were known as quite high-flying coloratura vehicles, as well as singing the coloratura lower-voiced vehicles of La Cenerentola, Rossini's Cinderella, Tancredi, Arsace. Those are all what we might consider more of a contralto role these days. Cherubino, and from Nozze di Figaro, and Romeo of Bellini, not of Gounod. So she had a very versatile voice, I guess is what we all just need to know about a soprano sfogato. Sonnambula takes place in a bucolic Swiss village with a mill. The mill is it gets sung about at one point, so that's why I pointed that out. And it opens on a betrothal procession in honor of Amina and her lover, the tenor Elvino. And we have some nice little charming, there's a banda sul palco, which means a little band, like a small offstage band on the, sul palco means on the stage. So it's in lontananza, far away, so it's in the wings usually. But you've got this. It doesn't sound like it's going to be particularly tragic, although it's got some challenges that come along to our hero and heroine. So we have Amina and Elvino celebrating their yes, I got the gender correct, celebrating their engagement. But we also have Lisa, who's the proprietress of the local tavern. She was thrown over or abandoned by Elvino when he fell in love with Amina. So she's rather bitter to watch this celebration play out. She says everything is joyful, everything is festival, is a party, but for me, only for me, I have none of this. I don't have any happiness, and it's just all about torment for me. And this is, again, that two-part aria that we're so familiar with bel canto compositional style, the solita forma, the usual form, as they call it. We have something quite slow and lyrical, and then a moment in the middle which changes the trajectory of the scene, and then the more brilliant second half of the aria. So she's very sad, can't you tell? That's all an orchestral cadenza. So she's quite sad, and that doesn't have precisely the exact structure because it's not terribly slow for the beginning. But then Amina's next aria, and she's got several big ones, does follow that path. Amina is kind of astounded and amazed at how wonderful her life is, and so she says, "Compagne, companions, tenere amici, good friends. Oh mother, oh what joy!" And then she says, how for me serene is reborn this day. It's amazing, like a beautiful flower, più bello e ameno. So it's so beautiful and so comforting. So that's the theme of the Cavatina. Then we have the tempo di mezzo. She has a little bit of a cadenza, some high notes. It's pretty amazing, and it's like. And then we have allegro brillante, very exciting. And she says, "Always, oh happy Amina, shall it be this way for you. This, you should always be happy." Basically, the chorus comes in. And so forth. And then we get to get to the cabaletta, and she says, "Sopra il sen la man mi posa palpitar balzar lo sento." She says, "I put my hand on my chest, and all I feel is the palpitating of my heart." It's like all those moments in reality TV where they say, "My heart is beating out of my chest." So, and she says it's a heart that can hardly sustain its energy because it's so happy. So the Cavatina is kind of a gratefulness for how wonderful everything is, and then the cabaletta is not such a change, it's just a huge outpouring of ecstasy and how happy her life is. Then we have this happening in a second time, and it will probably be ornamented. I just made up those ornaments. It could be something like that, where the melody line takes a sort of a different trajectory around there. I'm not saying that's what Natalie Dessay will sing tonight. I'm just saying that's the kind of ornamentation you can hear as I was sort of making it up casually, that there was, that the structure of the melody was there. It was just decorated. Then we have a stranger who appears, and Lisa invites him to stay at her inn. All are very surprised when the stranger, Rodolfo, we don't necessarily know his name for a while, seems to know his way around. And he says, she says, 3 miles, it's over there. It's, at dark of night, you have a trouble finding it, but until tomorrow I can find you there. And he says, "Oh, I would like that." Then he says, "Is there a hotel? Is there a hotel in the village?" Which is funny that he asks, because then he seems to know it. She says, "It's mine." "Which one?" "That one." "Oh, I know it." So he says, "Is there a hotel?" But then he's like, "Oh yeah, I know that one." That's a little bit of a drama issue. But so he says, so everyone's surprised. They say, "Costui che fia?" How could this be that he knows this? He's a stranger. And then he says, "The mill, the fountain, the woods, and the little factory." And then he says to himself, it's in parentheses, so we know it's to himself, "I recognize you, oh happy places. in which so happy and serene and tranquilo were the days passed. Places of my youth, my earliest youth. So that's his Cavatina, and then it gets into a very enthusiastic and energetic cabaletta. So the stranger seems interested in Amina, and Elvino finds himself quite jealous. As night falls, the villagers rush to take shelter, and they warn the stranger Rodolfo that there is a village phantom. So in the hotel, in the albergo, Lisa enters the stranger's room and says, all now know that he is Rodolfo. Everyone's figured it out, that he's the long-lost son of the lord of the village. She leaves at the sound of steps in the hallway, but drops a handkerchief. The phantom enters his room, and Rodolfo realizes it is a sleepwalking Amina. So there's a whole sleepwalking motif that happens, and it happens in this last time that she does that. So it's he says, Amina, and in fact, Lisa's hiding in a closet at this moment. She says, Amina, how can you be such a treacherous woman? She doesn't realize that she is actually, Lisa doesn't understand that Amina is sleepwalking. Rodolfo figures that out. And the action says Rodolfo running to Amina, who looks very happy, and he says, "O ciel, what should I do?" How happy the people are that are at the church, and she's imagining the moment that she's getting married. And then Rodolfo says, "In sogno ancora quell'anima nel suo bar." He's saying in a dream this soul is wandering, and so he's like, I don't know what to do. She believes but he's the first person to figure out that the phantom is actually this sleepwalking Amina. He climbs out the window so that he doesn't take advantage of her, and that her reputation is not sullied, but she is discovered by everyone that she's asleep in the room, and so she's accused by Elvino of being unfaithful. So then we have this finale where everyone gets kind of a little bit crazed about it's a typical bel canto finale, in that the energy builds and builds and builds until it sort of all explodes, and we leave for intermission thinking, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? I'm too fast. Then there's a stretch that really explodes. And kind of goes crazy. It's a lot of this kind of stuff happens in almost every bel canto moment. So this is a dramaturgical challenge, because not a whole lot happens in this opera. In the production I did before, they sort of solved it by having Amina be an inmate in an asylum, a Swiss asylum, where she was taking the waters and trying to be cured, and then she was wandering and remembering all the things that had led to this. In this particular case, the director has chosen to set it in a rehearsal hall, and it's a rehearsal hall where they're singing La Sonnambula as they are rehearsing La Sonnambula. So the story comes in and out of the rehearsal stuff and the actual plot things. So it kind of solves the issue of the very slender plot that doesn't have a lot to offer. So in the second act, the villagers, Amina and her mother, all approach the count, who is the lord of the area, and we discover is Rodolfo's father, to have him attest to her innocence. Despite the fact that everybody's speaking for Amina, Elvino remains unconvinced and decides to marry Lisa. Jerk. Rodolfo explains that Amina is, in fact, a Sonnambula, a sleepwalker. Lisa's marriage is halted when the handkerchief that she drops when she tries to get out of the room earlier in that first act is produced. So then obviously she's been, it kind of puts a question mark on her reputation that she was in a gentleman's room. Suddenly, everyone sees Amina, the phantom, sleepwalking across a very unstable structure, and everyone is afraid to wake her up at that point because they think she's going to injure herself. This is a very interesting cavatina cabaletta. A lot of times, singers will want to excerpt these for auditions. The challenge of the cavatina cabaletta here is that the cavatina is Amina sleepwalking, and then a lot of things happen in the tempo di mezzo. So she's sleepwalking, and she's dreaming, and she's saying, I can't believe that the flower of our love was so easily extinguished. Interestingly enough, the opening line of this aria, "A non credea mirarti si presto estinto o fiori," says, I couldn't believe that the flower was extinguished so soon, is the line that is engraved on Bellini's tomb, because obviously he passed away at the age of 34. So we have this sleepwalking moment, and then in the tempo di mezzo, she wakes up, she gets across the dangerous structure safely, she wakes up, Elvino forgives her, everyone's happy, and they decide to get married. So a lot of things happen, and then we suddenly get to this final aria. It's very much like Cenerentola, where it ends with a big showpiece for the prima donna, where she expresses her joy. And so she says, human thought has not ever reached the amount of happiness that I have. So... It's got a nice high E flat there. Usually they extrapolate a high F at the end for the big finale. So this is it's interesting because the tempo di mezzo in this case, a lot of times you can just skip the tempo di mezzo or just add a little bit in it to change the key, and you can make the two parts make sense. But here you have to go from sleepwalking and very hazy and slightly in a mad scene because you're in a dream to suddenly happy, and it's really a challenge to figure out how to make that cut work. Just a little interesting thing. People will do these for auditions, but it's definitely hard to pull off dramatically without the chorus and everything else. So Elvira calls to her, she wakens in his arms, everyone's happy, and they're thrilled. The village is thrilled to know that they are not haunted, and in fact, it was just Amina and everything's going to be fine. And so we all end happily ever after. But having gone through the plot once again, I'm sort of struck by Elvino. Dude, come on. Have some faith in your girl. But anyway, Elvino's issues aside, it's a beautiful vehicle for lots of wonderful vocalism, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to listen to these masters of this style present this tricky opera. So thanks again for joining me and for supporting the arts and opera wherever you may be. We are grateful that you are enjoying and participating in our digital content, and we're excited to keep making that for you. It's a lot of fun to come up with innovative ways to use the digital media. If you have the ability in this challenging time to offer financial support, we are super grateful for that. Longtime members of our Utah Opera family Judy Brady and Drew Browning are very generously helping us present this particular aspect of digital content on Facebook and YouTube, so we're grateful to them. Take care of each other, be safe, and keep washing your hands, and we'll see you next time. Bye.